Abigail Thornton's fingers had gone numb an hour ago. Now she couldn't feel her feet. The December blizzard howled around her like a living thing. And Warren Blackwood's note changed my mind. "Don't come" had long since blown from her frozen hands. She'd walked 2 miles from where the stage driver left her following wagon ruts she could barely see through the snow. Her wedding dress trunk lay abandoned somewhere behind her. She didn't remember when she'd let go of it. The cold didn't hurt anymore. That's how she knew she was dying. Then she heard hoofbeats through the storm. Before we continue, friends, I need to ask a favor. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me until the very end of this story, and comment below with your city. I want to see how far Abigail's journey travels. Now, let's begin. The horse materialized from the white curtain of snow like something from a fever dream. Black as midnight breath steaming, and on its back sat a man wrapped in a heavy coat, his hat pulled low against the wind. Abigail tried to speak, but her jaw wouldn't work. She tried to lift her hand, but her arm hung useless at her side. She could only stand there swaying as the rider dismounted and covered the distance between them in 3 long strides. "Jesus Christ," his voice cut through the wind. "How long you been out here?" Abigail's lips moved. No sound came. The man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind, grabbed her shoulders. His eyes were the color of winter sky, sharp and assessing. "Can you hear me?" She managed a nod. "Barely." "I'm taking you to my ranch. Don't fight me." He swept her up like she weighed nothing, and Abigail was too cold, too tired, too defeated to protest. He settled her in front of him on the saddle, wrapped his coat around them both, and spurred the horse forward into the storm. "Stay awake," he said against her ear. "You hear me? Stay awake. Talk to me." Can't." The word scraped out. "Then listen. My name's Nathaniel Bridger. Nate. My ranch is a mile north. You're gonna make it. Understand?" Abigail closed her eyes. "No." His arm tightened around her waist. "Eyes open. What's your name?" Abby." "Abby what?" "Thornton." "Where you from?" "Abby Thornton. Boston." "Long way from home." She almost laughed. Home. She hadn't had a home since her father's sewing shop burned 6 months ago, taking him with it. Since the landlord came for the rent she couldn't pay. Since she answered Warren Blackwood's advertisement for a respectable bride willing to work, comfortable life assured. "You're the mail-order bride," Nate said. It wasn't a question. "Blackwood's." "Was." The cold made her honest. He changed his mind. Nate's body went rigid behind her. "He left you at the gate in this storm. Stage driver. Said Warren paid him. Told him to leave me at the property line. Gave me a note." "Where's Blackwood now?" "Don't know. Note said don't come looking." Nate said something under his breath that Abigail's frozen brain couldn't quite catch, but she recognized the tone. Rage. Pure, cold rage. "He's a dead man," Nate said quietly. The ranch house appeared through the snow, a low, solid structure of logs and stone, with light glowing warm in the windows. Nate dismounted, pulled Abigail down, and half-carried her to the door. Inside was heat, blessed heat, and Abigail gasped as feelings started returning to her skin in painful pins and needles. "Don't put her by the fire," a woman's voice said sharply. "Not yet. Warm her slow, or you'll hurt her worse." Abigail's vision swam. She saw an older woman, gray-haired and stern-faced, rising from a rocking chair. Saw Nate lowering her into that same chair. Saw the woman wrapping blankets around her, tucking them tight. "Who's this Nathaniel?" "Found her on the road, half frozen. She's Blackwood's mail-order bride. He abandoned her in the storm." The woman's hands stilled. "He what?" "You heard me, Mrs. Chen." The woman, Mrs. Chen, made a sound of pure disgust. "That man's father should have drowned him at birth. Here, girl. Drink this." She pressed a cup of something warm to Abigail's lips. Tea heavily sweetened. Abigail drank greedily, burning her tongue, not caring. "Slow," Mrs. Chen said. "You'll make yourself sick." "She needs a doctor," Nate said. "She needs to warm up gradual and sleep. Fetch me more blankets from the chest. And get those wet clothes off her." Nate turned away immediately, giving Abigail privacy, as Mrs. Chen helped her out of her soaked dress and into a flannel nightgown that hung on her frame. The older woman's hands were gentle but efficient, and Abigail felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness of it. "There now," Mrs. Chen said. "You're safe. Sleep." Abigail wanted to ask questions. Wanted to know where she was, who these people were, what would happen to her come morning. But exhaustion pulled at her like an undertow, and she surrendered to it. When Abigail woke, weak winter sunlight filtered through a window beside her. She was in a small bedroom with plain wooden walls and a patchwork quilt tucked around her. Her dress hung drying near a small stove in the corner. On a chair sat a tray with bread, cheese, and water. The door opened, and Mrs. Chen entered, carrying more wood for the stove. "You're awake. Good. How do you feel?" "Sore." Abigail's voice was hoarse. "Tired. You'll be both for a few days. Frostbite on 3 fingers and both feet, but you'll keep them. You're lucky Nathaniel found you when he did. Another hour, and we'd be digging your grave come spring thaw." Abigail closed her eyes. "Where am I?" "Bridger Ranch, 15 miles west of Copper Ridge, Montana territory. You're in Nathaniel's house. I'm his housekeeper, Dorothy Chen. Widow. Been working for him 3 years now." "I can't pay." "Nobody asked you to pay." Mrs. Chen's tone was brisk. "Now eat something. You need strength." Abigail managed half the bread and some cheese before exhaustion claimed her again. She slept through the day, waking only when Mrs. Chen brought her dinner stew, thick and rich, that tasted like heaven. "Mr. Bridger wants to speak with you," Mrs. Chen said, "when you're strong enough." "Now," Abigail said, "I need to know what happens to me." Mrs. Chen studied her, then nodded. "I'll fetch him." Nate entered a few minutes later, hat in hands. In daylight, Abigail could see him properly. He was younger than she'd thought, mid-30s perhaps, with dark hair silvering at the temples, and a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so weathered and serious. Scars marked his hands, and a thin line crossed his left eyebrow. "Miss Thornton." He stood awkwardly in the doorway. "How are you feeling?" "Alive. Thanks to you." "Don't thank me yet. We need to talk about your situation." Abigail sat up straighter, wincing as her sore muscles protested. "I have no money, Mr. Bridger. No family. Nothing except the clothes I was wearing. I can work. I'm a seamstress, was a seamstress. I can cook, clean, mend. If you'll give me a few days to recover, I can earn my keep until I figure out what to do next." Nate was quiet for a long moment. "That's not what I'm asking." "Then what are you asking?" "I'm asking what you want to do about Warren Blackwood." The name hit her like a fist. "There's nothing to do. He made his choice. He left you to die in a blizzard. That's not just abandonment. That's attempted murder." Abigail hadn't thought of it that way. The realization made her stomach turn. "I can't prove anything. It would be my word against his." "Not if the stage driver talks." "He won't. Warren paid him." "Everyone talks if you ask the right way." Nate's voice was flat, emotionless. "I could make him talk." Something in his tone made Abigail look at him sharply. This was a man who'd done violence before, known it intimately. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel oddly safe. "No," she said quietly. "I don't want revenge. I just want to survive." Nate studied her face. "You're stronger than you look." "I've had to be." He nodded slowly, seeming to come to some decision. "All right. Here's what I'm offering. You can stay here through the winter. Mrs. Chen's getting older, she could use help with the house. I'll pay you wages, room board and $20 a month. Come spring, if you want to move on, I'll stake you the money to get to wherever you're going. If you want to stay, we'll figure out a permanent arrangement. $20 a month. More than she'd made in Boston doing piecework 16 hours a day. Why? Abigail asked. Why would you help me? Nate was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I know what it's like to be alone when you counted on not being. And because Warren Blackwood's a coward, and I won't let a coward's choices destroy a woman's life. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. You need anything at all you ask. Don't go without because you're too proud. Pride's a luxury we can't afford out here. Understand? Abigail nodded, throat tight. After he left, she lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. 3 days ago, she'd been on a train heading west, full of hope and terror in equal measure. 2 days ago, she'd been abandoned in a snowstorm by a man she'd never met. Yesterday, she'd nearly frozen to death. Today, a stranger had offered her a lifeline. She didn't understand it, didn't trust it, but she was too tired and too broken to refuse it. Abigail recovered slowly. The frostbite healed, leaving her fingers stiff and clumsy for days. She spent her time in the small bedroom mending clothes Mrs. Chen brought her Nate's shirts worn and frayed at the cuffs. The work was familiar, soothing. Her hands remembered the rhythm even when her mind wandered. On the 4th day, she was strong enough to leave the bedroom. Mrs. Chen helped her dress and led her to the main room of the house. It was larger than Abigail expected, a great room with a stone fireplace, a long table and shelves lined with books. Simple, but well built. Cared for. Nate was at the table studying what looked like account books. He looked up when they entered, rising immediately. Miss Thornton, you look better. I feel better. Abigail managed a small smile. And please call me Abby. After you saved my life, formality seems ridiculous. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe. Abby, then. And I'm Nate. Mrs. Chen bustled around, setting out lunch bread, cold roast beef, pickles. Abigail sat carefully, still sore, and found herself ravenous. She ate slowly, aware of both of them watching her. You're from Boston, Nate said. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Born and raised. My father was a tailor. Taught me the trade when I was 7. What brought you west? The question was casual, but Abigail sensed real curiosity beneath it. She set down her bread. My father died 6 months ago. Fire took his shop and him with it. I had debts I couldn't pay, no family, no prospects. Then I saw Mr. Blackwood's advertisement. Respectable rancher seeks capable wife. Must be strong, willing to work. Comfortable life assured. She smiled bitterly. I should have known better. Nothing in life is assured. His letters, Mrs. Chen said. What did they say? That he owned a successful ranch. That he was looking for a partner, not a servant. That he'd treat me with respect and kindness. Abigail laughed, the sound harsh. 3 months of letters. Beautiful letters full of descriptions of Montana, his home, his hopes for the future. I thought I knew him. I thought... She trailed off, unable to finish. You thought you'd found something real, Nate said quietly. Abigail met his eyes. Understanding lived there. He knew what it was like to hope and be disappointed. Yes. Warren Blackwood's a liar, Mrs. Chen said flatly. Everyone in Copper Ridge knows it. He inherited that ranch from his father and ran it into the ground in 5 years. Debts piled high as the mountains. He's been trying to sell it for 2 years now, but nobody wants land that poorly managed. Abigail felt her stomach drop. He told me he was successful. He's a fraud. This mail-order bride scheme, you're not the first, Abby. There have been 3 others over the past 18 months. The room spun. What happened to them? One made it to town and found work at the hotel. One got as far as the ranch gate, took one look at the place, and demanded the stage driver take her back to Copper Ridge. She left on the next train east. The third, Mrs. Chen's face darkened. She married him anyway. Lasted 3 months before she ran off in the night. Nobody's seen her since. Horror crawled up Abigail's spine. And nobody stopped him. How? Nate's voice was hard. He wasn't breaking any laws, just lying in letters. Can't arrest a man for that. But leaving me in a blizzard. That we can arrest him for, if you're willing to press charges. Abigail thought about it. Thought about facing Warren Blackwood in a courtroom, having to recount her humiliation in front of strangers. Thought about the whispers that would follow her poor, desperate woman foolish enough to answer an advertisement. What did she expect? No, she said firmly. I just want to forget he exists. Nate didn't argue, but she saw disapproval flicker across his face. Mrs. Chen just nodded, brisk and practical as always. Then you focus on getting strong, the older woman said. Winter's hard here. You'll need your strength. The days developed a rhythm. Abigail rose early, helped Mrs. Chen with breakfast, then spent the morning mending or doing light housework. Nate was often gone checking cattle, mending fences, doing the 100 tasks that kept a ranch running even in winter. When he returned, he was quiet, eating his meals quickly and retreating to his account books or disappearing into the barn. He wasn't unfriendly, just distant. Like he didn't quite know what to do with a woman in his house. Mrs. Chen, on the other hand, was a force of nature. She ran the household with military precision, and Abigail quickly learned not to argue. When Mrs. Chen said something needed doing, you did it. No questions. Nathaniel's a good man, the older woman said one afternoon as they kneaded bread together. But he's been alone too long. Doesn't know how to talk to people anymore. He talks to you, Abigail pointed out. I've known him since he first came to Montana. 7 years ago, that was. He was different then. Younger, angrier. Angry at what? Mrs. Chen's hands stilled in the dough. The war. He was an Army scout during the Indian campaigns, saw things no man should see, did things that haunt him still. When he mustered out, he came here looking for peace and quiet, built this place with his own hands. Abigail thought about the scars on Nate's hands, the hardness in his eyes. He found it peace. Some days, other days the ghosts are louder. Mrs. Chen resumed kneading, her movements practiced and efficient. But he's good to his word, Abby. If he says he'll help you, he will. You can trust that. Abigail wanted to believe her, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not anymore. 2 weeks after Nate found her in the storm, Abigail ventured outside for the first time. The cold hit her like a wall, stealing her breath, but she pushed through it. She needed to see this place in daylight, needed to understand where she'd landed. The ranch was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way. Snow covered everything, smooth and unmarked, except for paths Nate had shoveled between the house and barn. Mountains rose in the distance, white peaks against a blue sky so bright it hurt to look at. The silence was complete except for the wind and the occasional low of cattle. It was nothing like Boston. Nothing like the cramped streets and constant noise, the press of humanity, the smoke and soot. Here the world felt vast and empty, terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Careful. Nate's voice made her jump. He was coming from the barn leading a horse. Ice under that snow. You'll break your neck. I needed air. Could have opened a window. But his tone was mild, almost teasing. He tied the horse to a post and moved to her side. What do you think? It's... Abigail searched for words. Big. That surprised a laugh out of him, a short, rusty sound, like he didn't use it often. That it is. They stood in silence, watching the wind blow snow off the barn roof. Finally, Abigail said, "Thank you, for everything. I know I haven't said it properly." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You saved my life. You've given me shelter, food, wages. You've asked for nothing in return. I don't understand why, but I'm grateful." Nate was quiet for a long moment. Then, "7 years ago, I was in a bad place. Drinking too much, fighting too much, didn't care if I lived or died. A woman named Sarah Chen found me half dead in an alley in Copper Ridge. Brought me to her house, sobered me up, made me eat. Told me I could either die slow or live hard, but I had to choose. I chose to live. She helped me buy this land, helped me build the house, wouldn't take a cent for it." Mrs. Chen's daughter. Mother-in-law. Sarah died 3 years ago. Pneumonia. Mrs. Chen stayed on to help me run the place. Said Sarah would have wanted it. He looked at Abigail directly. "I'm helping you because someone helped me when I needed it. That's all. No mystery to it." But there was mystery to it. Because he could have taken her to town, left her at the hotel or the church. He didn't have to offer wages, didn't have to give her a place in his home. He'd chosen to help, and Abigail didn't understand why. Unless... "You're lonely," she said quietly. Nate stiffened. "What?" "You're lonely. This big house, all this land, and no one to share it with except Mrs. Chen. You help people because it gives you purpose, makes you feel less alone." For a moment she thought she'd gone too far. Nate's jaw tightened, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then it passed, and he just looked tired. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I just don't like seeing people suffer when I can stop it." He walked away before she could respond, leading the horse into the barn and leaving Abigail alone in the snow. She'd struck a nerve. She knew it, and part of her felt guilty for it. But part of her felt something else. Recognition. Because she was lonely too. Desperately, achingly lonely. And maybe that was why she'd answered Warren's advertisement in the first place. Not for security or comfort, but for the simple human need to be seen. To matter to someone. The wind picked up, and Abigail shivered. She went back inside where Mrs. Chen had dinner waiting, and the fire burned warm and steady. That night, lying in her small room, Abigail made a decision. She would stay through winter, would earn her wages honestly, and come spring she would leave. Because staying meant risking attachment, and attachment meant vulnerability, and she'd been vulnerable enough for one lifetime. She wouldn't let herself hope again. Hope was what got you abandoned in a blizzard. Christmas came to the Bridger Ranch on a Tuesday morning, cold and bright. Abby woke to the smell of cinnamon and realized Mrs. Chen had been baking since before dawn. She dressed quickly, fingers still stiff from the lingering frostbite, and found the kitchen transformed. Pine boughs hung over the doorways, and a small tree stood in the corner of the main room, decorated with strings of berries and paper stars. "You did all this?" Abby asked. Mrs. Chen didn't look up from the stove. "Nathaniel needs reminding that holidays exist. He'd work straight through if I let him." "Does he celebrate Christmas?" "He tolerates it. For my sake." The older woman's mouth quirked. His mother loved Christmas. Used to decorate their whole house in Tennessee. After she died, he stopped seeing the point. But I make him sit down for a proper dinner at least. Abby moved to help with breakfast, falling into the rhythm they'd established over the past weeks. She set the table while Mrs. Chen finished the biscuits, and when Nate came in from the barn stamping snow from his boots, everything was ready. He stopped when he saw the decorations. Something crossed his face, pain maybe, or memory. "Merry Christmas, Nathaniel," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Merry Christmas." His voice was rough. He looked at Abby. "You too." "Thank you." Abby felt suddenly awkward, aware that she had nothing to give him, no way to mark the day except her presence. "I'm sorry I don't have—" "Don't." Nate sat down heavily. "I don't need anything." They ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Abby had learned that Nate's silence wasn't rejection. He simply didn't waste words. When he spoke, it mattered. After breakfast, Mrs. Chen produced a small package wrapped in brown paper and handed it to Abby. "For you." Inside was a wool shawl, deep blue, hand-knitted. Beautiful. I can't accept this, Abby said, throat tight. You can and you will. You need warm things. That fancy coat you came in won't last the winter. Abby wrapped the shawl around her shoulders, feeling the weight of it, the care that had gone into every stitch. Thank you. I wish I had something for you. You help me every day. That's gift enough. Nate had disappeared into his room and emerged with 2 packages. He handed one to Mrs. Chen, a new set of knitting needles, fine steel, and stood there holding the other, clearly uncertain. This is for you, he said, finally holding it out to Abby. If you want it. Inside was a sewing kit, the kind Abby hadn't seen since her father's shop burned. Needles of every size, thread in a dozen colors, scissors with pearl handles, a silver thimble. It must have cost a fortune. I can't, Abby whispered. You can sew properly with it. Make yourself clothes. Take in mending from town if you want extra money. It's practical. Nate's jaw was set defensive. That's all. But it wasn't practical. It was thoughtful. It said he'd noticed her struggling with Mrs. Chen's worn needles, noticed her making do. It said he'd gone to town a 3-hour ride in winter just to buy this for her. Thank you, Abby managed. It's perfect. Something in Nate's shoulders relaxed. He nodded once and turned away, but not before Abby saw the ghost of a smile. They spent Christmas Day quietly. Mrs. Chen cooked a feast: roast chicken, potatoes, carrots from the root cellar, an apple pie that made Abby want to weep. They ate until they couldn't move, and afterward Nate read aloud from a book of poetry, while Mrs. Chen knitted and Abby worked on hemming a dress. It was the best Christmas Abby had had in years, maybe ever. And that terrified her, because it felt like family, like home, and she'd promised herself she wouldn't hope for that again. The week after Christmas brought a blizzard that lasted 3 days. Snow piled so high against the house that Nate had to dig a tunnel to reach the barn. They were trapped inside, the 3 of them, and Abby learned things about her companions she hadn't known. Mrs. Chen had been born in California, daughter of Chinese immigrants who'd worked the railroads. She'd married young to a man who brought her to Montana and died 2 years later in a mining accident. Her daughter Sarah had been her whole world. Losing her nearly killed me, Mrs. Chen said quietly, hands busy with her knitting. But Nathaniel needed me, gave me purpose when I had none. Nate, for his part, talked about his childhood in Tennessee. His mother's garden, his father's horses, the life he'd left behind when he enlisted at 17. My father said I was a fool, Nate said, staring into the fire. Said the war wasn't our fight. He was right, but I was young and stupid and thought I knew better. What happened to your family? Abby asked. Father died while I was gone, pneumonia. Mother followed 6 months later. Grief, mostly. My sister wrote that she just gave up. His hands tightened on his coffee cup. By the time I made it home, they were both buried. Sister had sold the farm and moved to Ohio. I haven't seen her since. Do you miss them? Every day. But missing doesn't change anything. He looked at her. What about you? Any family back in Boston? No. My mother died when I was 16. Consumption. Father raised me alone after that. We were close. Abby's throat tightened. He taught me everything about tailoring. Used to say I had better eyes than he did. Then the fire. She couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Nate nodded, understanding. We're all refugees, Mrs. Chen said, running from something or toward something. Either way, we ended up here. Is that bad? Abby asked. No, child. It's just life. On the 3rd day of the blizzard, the wind finally died. Nate spent the morning digging out, and by afternoon, the world was white and still and achingly beautiful. Abby stood on the porch, wrapped in her new shawl, and watched Nate work. He moved with economical grace, each shovelful precise. His breath clouded in the cold air, and sweat darkened his shirt despite the temperature. He'd pushed his hat back, and Abby could see his face clearly. For once, the strong nose, the sharp jaw, the brackets around his mouth that spoke of pain held private. He wasn't handsome in any conventional sense. His face was too hard, too weathered. But there was something about him that drew the eye. Strength, maybe. Or integrity worn like armor. "You're staring," Mrs. Chen said from behind her. Abby jumped. "I wasn't." "You were. It's all right. He's worth looking at." Heat flooded Abby's cheeks. "I don't think of him that way." "Don't you?" Mrs. Chen's voice was knowing. "He saved your life. He's given you shelter and kindness. He treats you with respect. Why wouldn't you think of him that way?" "Because it's not real," Abby said sharply. "This whole thing, it's gratitude, proximity. It's not real." "Who says?" "I do. I'm not staying, Mrs. Chen. Come spring, I'm leaving. Finding work somewhere, building my own life." The older woman was quiet for a moment. Then, "And if he asks you to stay, he won't." "But if he does?" Abby pulled the shawl tighter. "Then I'll tell him no. I won't be dependent on anyone ever again." "I can't." Mrs. Chen sighed. "Independence is good, child, but it's a cold companion in winter." She went back inside, leaving Abby alone with her thoughts and the sight of Nate clearing snow as if his life depended on it. New Year came and went. January brought more snow, brutal cold, and a loneliness Abby hadn't expected. She'd thought she wanted solitude after Boston's crowded streets. But this isolation was different. This was days without seeing another soul except Nate and Mrs. Chen, nights so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. She threw herself into work, made herself 3 new dresses from fabric Mrs. Chen had stored away, took in Nate's entire wardrobe, and mended every tear, replaced every button. Started knitting socks because Mrs. Chen said they always needed socks. And she watched Nate. Not intentionally. But he was always there, coming in from the cold, with snow in his hair, sitting by the fire with his account books, reading poetry, in that low, rough voice that made her stomach flutter. She learned his habits. The way he took his coffee black and strong. The way he rubbed his left shoulder when it ached from an old war injury. The way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't watching, expression unguarded and hungry. It scared her how much she wanted him to keep looking at her that way. In mid-January, Nate announced he was riding to Copper Ridge for supplies. "I'll go with you," Abby said immediately. He frowned. "It's a 3-hour ride each way, in this cold." "I'm stronger now, and I need to see the town, need to know what opportunities exist." Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment maybe, but he nodded. "We leave at dawn." Copper Ridge was smaller than Abby expected. One main street with a general store, a hotel, a saloon, a church, and a scattering of houses. People moved slowly through the cold, bundled in layers, hunched against the wind. When Nate and Abby rode in, several people stopped to stare. "That's Bridger," someone muttered. "And who's that with him?" Nate helped Abby down from her horse, his hands steady at her waist. "Stay close," he said quietly. "People here gossip." The general store was warm and crowded. A woman behind the counter, plump, middle-aged, with sharp eyes, looked up when they entered. "Nathaniel Bridger, haven't seen you in weeks." "Mrs. Patterson, this is Abby Thornton. She's staying at my ranch helping Mrs. Chen." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "Is she now? And where did Miss Thornton come from?" "Boston," Abby said evenly, meeting the woman's gaze. "I'm a seamstress. If anyone in town needs mending or dressmaking, I'm available for hire." "A seamstress." Mrs. Patterson's tone made it sound like an accusation. "Well, we can always use another set of skilled hands, though I'm surprised you'd come all the way to Montana Territory for work." The implication was clear. Abby felt her spine stiffen. "Opportunities in Boston were limited. I heard the West offered more possibilities." Possibilities. Yes, I'm sure that's what drew you. Mrs. Patterson's smile was cold. Does this have anything to do with Warren Blackwood? The name hit Abby like a slap. Nate's hand moved to her elbow, steadying her. Warren Blackwood's business is his own, Nate said, voice flat. Now we need flour, sugar, coffee, and salt. Can you help us, or should we take our money elsewhere, Mrs. Patterson's smile never wavered, but she moved to gather their supplies. As she worked, Abby became aware of other people in the store watching, whispering. A younger woman in a green dress stared openly, her expression hostile. That's her, the woman hissed to her companion. The mail-order bride. She's living with Bridger now. Can you imagine? Shameless, her companion agreed. Abby's cheeks burned. She wanted to explain, to defend herself, but what could she say? That Nate had saved her life, that their arrangement was purely business. They wouldn't believe her, wouldn't want to believe her. Nate finished paying and gathered their supplies. Let's go. Outside, Abby took a shaky breath. They all know. Small town. Everyone knows everything. Nate loaded the supplies onto the horses. Don't let it bother you. Easy for you to say. They're not calling you shameless. He turned to face her fully. Abby, I don't give a damn what this town thinks. Neither should you. You've done nothing wrong. Haven't I? Living in your house, taking your money? Working for your money, he interrupted. Earning every cent. There's no shame in that. They don't see it that way. Then they're fools. His voice was hard. You going to let fools dictate your life? Before Abby could answer, a man emerged from the saloon across the street. He was soft-looking, well-dressed, in a way that spoke of money, but not work. His face was fleshed and weak, and when he saw them, he went pale. Warren Blackwood. Well, Warren said, recovering his composure. If it isn't Miss Thornton, I heard you survived your journey. How fortunate. Nate moved between them so fast, Abby barely saw it. Get back inside, Blackwood. This is a public street, Bridger. I have every right. You have no rights where she's concerned. You forfeited those when you left her to die. Warren's eyes darted nervously. I don't know what lies she's told you, but... The stage driver talked, told me exactly what you paid him to do. That's attempted murder in most territories. The color drained from Warren's face. He's lying. I never... You want to finish that sentence? Nate's voice was deadly quiet. Because the sheriff's right inside that office there. We could go have a conversation with him right now. Warren backed up a step. You can't prove anything. Can't I? Driver's willing to testify. So's Abby. So am I. I found her half frozen on the road. Doctor in Copper Ridge treated her frostbite. That's a lot of proof, Warren. She came here to trap me into marriage. I had every right to refuse. You had the right to refuse. You didn't have the right to kill her. People were gathering now, watching the confrontation. Abby saw Mrs. Patterson in the doorway of the general store, the woman in the green dress beside her. The whole town was about to witness whatever happened next. Nate, Abby said quietly, don't. He didn't look at her. He needs to answer for what he did. Maybe, but not like this. Not here. She moved to his side, placed a hand on his arm. Felt the tension there, the barely controlled rage. Please. For a long moment, Nate didn't move. Then slowly, he stepped back. You're lucky she's got more mercy than you deserve, he told Warren. But hear me clear. You come near her again, you speak to her, you even look at her wrong, and I will end you. That's not a threat, it's a promise. Warren tried for bravado. You can't threaten me. I just did. Now get out of my sight before I forget I'm trying to be civilized. Warren retreated into the saloon. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly. Abby stood in the cold street shaking while Nate checked their supplies with hands that weren't quite steady. We should go, he said. They rode out of town in silence. An hour into the journey, Abby finally spoke. You would have killed him. Yes. Why? Nate was quiet for a long time. When he answered, his voice was low. Because some things can't be forgiven, and what he did to you is one of them. It's not your fight, Nate. The hell it isn't. He looked at her then, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. You're under my protection now. That means something to me. It means everything. Abby didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process the fierce protectiveness in his voice the way he'd faced down Warren without hesitation. No one had ever defended her like that. Ever. Thank you, she whispered. Nate nodded once and urged his horse faster, putting distance between them and the town. That night, Abby couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Warren's face, hearing Nate's voice promising violence. Kept thinking about the way the town had looked at her, like she was something shameful, something less than human. She got up, wrapped herself in her shawl, and went to the main room. The fire was burning low, and Nate sat in front of it, still dressed, staring into the flames. Can't sleep either, she asked. He shook his head. Keep thinking I should have hit him. I'm glad you didn't. Are you? He looked at her. Because I'm not. He deserves worse than words. Abby sat down in the other chair. Maybe, but violence wouldn't solve anything. It would just make everything worse. How do you figure? Because then they'd say I drove two men to fight over me, that I'm trouble, that everything they suspect about me is true. She pulled the shawl tighter. I can't afford that reputation, Nate. I need this town to accept me if I'm going to make a life here. You planning on staying? The question hung between them. Abby thought about her promise to herself leave in spring, build her own life. But sitting here in the firelight with Nate feeling safer than she had in months, that promise felt hollow. I don't know, she admitted. I thought I knew what I wanted, but now I'm not sure anymore. Nate leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Let me tell you what I see. I see a woman who's stronger than she knows, who survived things that would have broken most people, who works hard and asks for nothing and deserves everything. He paused. I see someone worth keeping. Abby's heart hammered. Nate, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. Not making any claims, just telling you what I see. You want to leave come spring, I'll stake you the money like I promised. But if you want to stay, he met her eyes. I'd like that. More than I can say. The words should have terrified her, should have sent her running. But all Abby felt was warmth spreading through her chest, melting something frozen she hadn't known was there. I'll think about it, she whispered. Nate nodded and stood. That's all I'm asking. Good night, Abby. Good night. After he left, Abby sat by the fire until it burned to embers, thinking about choices and chances, and the difference between running away and running toward something. February brought a thaw, brief and false. The snow melted just enough to make everything muddy, then froze again overnight, turning the ranch into a treacherous maze of ice. Nate fell, checking the fence line, wrenched his shoulder badly, and came back to the house white-faced with pain. Mrs. Chen sent Abby to help him with his coat and boots while she heated water for a compress. Abby's hands shook as she eased the coat off, trying not to jar his shoulder. I'm all right, Nate said through gritted teeth. You're not. She helped him to a chair. Let me see. He unbuttoned his shirt with his good hand, exposing the shoulder. It was already swelling, the skin discolored. Abby had seen injuries before her father had fallen, once dislocated his shoulder, and she knew how to help. This is going to hurt, she warned. Can't hurt worse than it already does. She pressed gently, feeling for the joint. Nate hissed but didn't pull away. His skin was warm under her fingers, scarred in places, old wounds from the war. She tried not to notice the muscles, the strength of him. Tried to focus on helping. It's not dislocated, she said finally. Just badly strained. You need to rest it. Can't rest. Too much work. Then the work waits. Mrs. Chen appeared with the hot compress. "You're no good to anyone," injured Nathaniel. "Now hold still." Between the two of them, they got him comfortable. Abby made dinner while Mrs. Chen tended Nate, and they ate quietly, the mood subdued. Afterward, Abby insisted on helping Nate to his room. "I can manage," he protested. "Don't be stubborn." She slipped her arm around his waist, taking some of his weight. He was solid and warm against her side, and Abby tried not to think about how right it felt to be this close to him. In his room, sparse clean, nothing but a bed and a dresser, she helped him sit on the edge of the mattress. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You've done more for me. This is nothing." She started to leave, but his hand caught hers. "Abby, about what I said the other night." "You don't have to explain." "I do, because I need you to understand I'm not trying to trap you here. You're free to go whenever you want. But if you stay, it should be because you want to, not because you feel obligated." Abby looked down at their joined hands. His was scarred and calloused strong despite the injury. Hers was small in comparison, but no longer soft. The work had changed her, hardened her in ways that felt right. "What if I don't know what I want?" she asked. "Then you take your time figuring it out. No pressure, no expectations." She squeezed his hand once and let go. "Get some rest." But as she closed the door behind her, Abby realized something. She did know what she wanted. She just wasn't ready to admit it yet. The next week was difficult. Nate's shoulder healed slowly, and he chafed at being unable to work at full capacity. Mrs. Chen kept him inside as much as possible, and Abby helped with the outdoor chores, feeding the horses, checking on the cattle in the nearby pasture, hauling water. The work was hard, but satisfying. Abby had never been strong in Boston too many years, hunched over a sewing machine in bad light. But here she was, building muscle, building endurance, becoming someone new. One afternoon she was in the barn brushing down Nate's horse when she heard voices outside, male voices unfamiliar. She set down the brush and moved to the door carefully. 3 men on horseback had stopped in the yard. They were rough-looking, unshaven, with hard eyes and harder mouths. One of them called out, "Anyone home?" Abby's instinct screamed danger. She backed deeper into the barn, looking for a weapon. Found a pitchfork. The front door of the house opened. Nate emerged, his right arm in a sling, but his bearing steady. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" "We're looking for work," the leader said. He was older, with a scar running down his cheek. "Heard you might be hiring." "Heard wrong. I'm not." "That's too bad. We really need work." The man's eyes swept the property. "Nice place you got here. Lot of land, lot of cattle. Seems like you could use extra hands." "I've got all the help I need." "That's so." The man smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "Because I heard you hurt yourself. Hard to run a ranch with a bad shoulder." "I manage. We could help with that, for the right price." "I'm not interested." The man's smile faded. "You should reconsider. These are hard times. Dangerous. A man alone injured with all this property. Accidents happen." Abby's blood ran cold. These weren't men looking for work. They were threatening Nate. Probably scouting for someone. Maybe Warren Blackwood. Maybe someone else who wanted the land. Nate's good hand moved toward his hip, where he kept his gun. "I think you boys should move along now." "No need for hostility. We're just offering our services." "And I'm declining. Now get off my property before I make you." The scarred man's eyes went flat. "You're in no condition to make anyone do anything, Bridger." "Maybe not." Mrs. Chen's voice rang out from the house. She stood on the porch holding a rifle aimed steady. "But I am." The men's horses shifted nervously. Abby stepped out of the barn, pitchfork in hand, positioning herself where they could see her. 3 against 3 now. Better odds. The scarred man assessed the situation, calculated his chances, and apparently decided they weren't good enough. "We'll be on our way then. But you think about our offer. Never know when you might need help." They rode off slowly, insolently. Nate waited until they were out of sight before lowering his hand from his gun. Trouble. Mrs. Chen said. Yes. Nate looked at Abby. You all right? Fine. Who were they? Men Warren hired most likely. Or someone else who wants to push me off this land. His jaw tightened. It's starting. What's starting? Abby asked. The land grab. Happens every few years. Someone decides my property's too valuable for one man. They make offers. When I refuse, they make threats. When threats don't work. He didn't finish, but Abby understood. Violence. That's what came next. We should go to the sheriff, she said. Sheriff can't do anything until they actually commit a crime, and by then it's usually too late. Nate looked at his injured shoulder with frustration. Damn timing. You're not alone, Mrs. Chen said firmly. We'll manage. We always have. But that night, Nate brought his rifle into the main room and loaded it. They took turns keeping watch 2-hour shifts through the night. Abby sat by the window with the rifle across her lap, watching the darkness and thinking about how quickly everything could change. How fragile safety was. She'd thought leaving Boston meant leaving danger behind. But danger was everywhere. You couldn't outrun it. You could only face it with the people you trusted. And she realized, sitting there in the dark with Nate asleep in the next room and Mrs. Chen snoring softly in hers, that she trusted these people. Completely. Against all logic, despite all her promises to herself, she'd let them in. She'd let herself belong. When spring came, if spring came, she wouldn't leave. Couldn't leave. Because this was home now, and these were her people, and no amount of fear could make her abandon that. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like relief. The men came back 4 days later. This time at dawn when the sky was barely gray, and the world still held its breath between night and morning. Abby heard the horses first, too many of them moving too fast. She was up and dressed in seconds, grabbing the rifle Nate had taught her to load. Mrs. Chen was already in the main room, her own rifle ready. Nate came from his bedroom, shoulders still bound, but his face set hard. How many? He asked. 6, maybe 7. Abby said, peering through the window. Too many. Nate checked his gun with his good hand. Mrs. Chen, you and Abby get to the root cellar. Like hell, Mrs. Chen said. I'm not leaving you, Abby added. Nate turned on them both. This isn't a negotiation. If they come in shooting, then we shoot back. Mrs. Chen interrupted. We've held this house before, Nathaniel. We'll hold it again. The riders stopped in the yard. The scarred man was there along with 6 others. One of them, Abby recognized a man from town who'd stared at her in the general store. They dismounted slowly, spreading out. Bridger, the scarred man called. We need to talk. Nate opened the door but stayed in the threshold, his body blocking entry. You're on my property uninvited. That's trespassing. We've got a business proposition. Our employer wants to buy your land. He's prepared to offer a fair price. Not interested. You haven't heard the price yet. Don't need to. This land's not for sale. The scarred man sighed. That's disappointing. See, my employer really wants this property, and he usually gets what he wants. Then he'll be disappointed for the first time. Think about it, Bridger. You're injured. You've got 2 women to protect. Winter's been hard on your cattle. I'm guessing you lost 20 head at least. You're in no position to refuse a generous offer. I'm in a perfect position to tell you to get the hell off my land before I start shooting. The man's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Won't be my first. One of the other men, younger and stupider looking than the rest, spat on the ground. Maybe we should just take what we want. Old man with a bad wing and 2 skirts can't stop us. Nate's gun came up smooth and steady, despite the sling. You're welcome to try. Mrs. Chen appeared at one window, rifle visible. Abby moved to the other. The men saw them and exchanged glances. 3 rifles changed the math considerably. This isn't over, the scarred man said. Yes, it is. You come back here, you'll leave in a box. That's a promise." The men mounted up, but they took their time about it, making a point. As they rode out, the young one, who'd spoken before, turned in his saddle. "Nice-looking woman you got there, Bridger. Be a shame if something happened to her." Nate fired. The bullet kicked up dirt 6 inches from the man's horse, sending it dancing sideways. The rider nearly fell off, catching himself at the last second. "Next one goes through you," Nate said calmly. "Now get." They left at a gallop this time, and Abby watched until they disappeared over the ridge. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to set the rifle down. "They'll be back," Mrs. Chen said. "I know." Nate closed the door and bolted it. "But not right away. They'll report to whoever hired them, wait for new orders." "We need help," Abby said. "We can't defend this place alone against that many men." "Who do we ask, Sheriff? Won't do anything until they commit a crime. Most folks in town think I'm too isolated, too unfriendly. They won't risk themselves for me." "Then we don't ask the town," Mrs. Chen said. "We ask the other ranchers, the ones who've dealt with this before?" Nate looked at her. "You mean Ezra Miller? And Sam Brennan? And the Hartley place? They've all fought off land grabbers. They'll understand. They'll also want to know why someone's so determined to push me off this land." Nate's jaw tightened. "There's only one reason that makes sense. Someone knows something about this property that I don't." "Gold?" Abby asked. "Or silver? Or water rights that matter more than I realized? Something valuable enough to kill for?" The words hung in the air. Kill. Because that's what this was heading toward. Abby had been naive to think violence could be avoided. Out here, the law was distant and slow, and men settled disputes with bullets. "I'm riding to Miller's place," Nate said. "Mrs. Chen, you and Abby stay inside. Keep the rifles loaded. Anyone comes near this house who isn't me, you shoot first and ask questions later." "Your shoulder," Abby started. "We'll manage. I can ride and shoot left-handed if I have to." He looked at her directly. "I need to know you can do this. Can you shoot a man if it comes to that?" Abby thought about the young rider's threat, about Warren Blackwood leaving her to freeze, about all the men in her life who'd thought her weak and disposable. "Yes," she said. "I can." Nate held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Good." He left an hour later, after making them promise 3 times to stay inside and keep watch. Abby stood at the window after he'd gone, rifle across her lap, and wondered if he'd come back. Wondered if this was the last time she'd see him alive. Mrs. Chen sat in her rocking chair, knitting with hands that never faltered. "He'll be fine. Nathaniel's survived worse than hired thugs." "What if he doesn't come back?" "Then we hold this house ourselves until he does, and if he's dead, which he won't be, we bury him proper and keep living. That's what we do. We survive." The older woman's matter-of-fact tone steadied Abby. She was right. They would survive. They'd survived everything else. Nate returned at dusk with 3 other men. Ezra Miller was tall and lean with shrewd eyes and a quick smile. Sam Brennan was older, grizzled, with the air of a man who'd seen everything twice. The third man introduced himself as Thomas Hartley, quiet and competent-looking. "Nate told us about your visitors," Ezra said, accepting the coffee Mrs. Chen offered. "We've all dealt with similar problems. There's a group of investors out of Denver been buying up land all through this territory. They use threats and violence when money doesn't work." "Why?" Abby asked. "What's so valuable about this land?" "Railroad's coming through," Sam said. "Not this year, maybe not next, but it's coming. Whoever owns the land when it does will make a fortune. These investors are playing a long game. How do we stop them?" "We don't," Thomas said quietly. "We just make it too expensive for them to continue. They'll move on to easier targets." "So we fight," Nate said. "We fight." Ezra agreed. "And we make sure every rancher in this valley knows what's happening. Strength in numbers." They spent the evening making plans. The men would take turns keeping watch at the Bridger Ranch, 2 men at all times, rotating shifts. They'd send word to the other ranchers, organize a meeting to discuss collective defense. And they'd gather evidence, any information about who was behind the threats. "Could be Warren Blackwood," Sam said. "He's got debts. Might have sold information about your property to these investors." Abby felt her stomach turn. It made horrible sense. Warren knew Nate had helped her, probably hated him for it. Revenge and money would be powerful motivators. "I'll find out," Nate said. His voice was cold. "One way or another." The men left after midnight, except for Ezra, who'd volunteered for first watch. He settled on the porch with his rifle, and Abby heard him humming something low and tuneless as she prepared for bed. She couldn't sleep. Every sound made her jump: the wind, the settling of the house, Ezra's boots on the porch. She lay in her small room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about how quickly safety could dissolve, how fragile civilization was. A soft knock on her door made her sit up. "Yes, it's me," Nate said. "Can I come in?" She pulled the blanket around herself. "All right." He entered, still dressed, looking exhausted. In the lamplight, she could see new lines around his eyes. "I wanted to say thank you," he said. "For staying, for fighting. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. This is my home now." Something in his expression shifted. "Is it?" Abby met his eyes. "I thought about leaving come spring. Thought I'd find work in a city somewhere, build a life alone. But I don't want that anymore. I want this. This house, this land, this life. I want to stay." Nate crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt beside her bed. "Abby, if you stay, it can't be as hired help. It has to be as..." "As what?" He took her hand. His was rough and scarred, trembling slightly. "As my wife, if you'll have me. I know I'm not much. I'm damaged and difficult, and I've got more ghosts than any man deserves. But I love you. I think I've loved you since I found you in that storm. And if you'll give me a chance, I'll spend every day proving I'm worthy of you." Abby's vision blurred with tears. "You don't have to prove anything. You saved my life. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You protected me, respected me, saw me as I am, and didn't turn away. I love you too, Nate. So much it terrifies me." He stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid she might break. Then Abby wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back harder, and he made a sound low in his throat that sent heat through her entire body. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nate rested his forehead against hers. "We'll marry as soon as we can get a preacher out here. Make it official." "What about the men trying to take your land?" "Let them come. They'll find I've got more reason than ever to fight." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be long." After he left, Abby lay back down, but sleep was impossible. She was engaged. Going to marry Nate Bridger. Going to spend her life on this ranch in this territory, so far from everything she'd known. And she'd never been happier. The meeting of the ranchers took place 3 days later at the church in Copper Ridge. Nearly every landowner in the valley attended, 20 men and half a dozen women, all grim-faced and determined. Reverend Mills opened with a prayer, then turned the floor over to Ezra Miller. "We all know why we're here," Ezra said. "These investors from Denver are trying to push us off our land. They've threatened Nate Bridger directly, but he won't be the last. We need to decide how we're going to respond." "Why not just sell?" someone asked. "If they're offering good money." "Because this is our home," Sam Brennan interrupted. "We built this valley from nothing. We're not going to hand it over to city men who see us as obstacles." "What about the law?" "Law's 3 days away and doesn't care about our problems," Thomas Hartley said. "We're on our own." The debate went on for an hour. Some wanted to fight, others to negotiate, a few to simply wait and see. Abby sat beside Nate, listening, and realized that this was what frontier life meant. No government to protect you, no institutions to appeal to. Just neighbors who might help or might not, depending on whether they thought you deserved it. Finally, Reverend Mills stood. I propose we form a mutual defense association. Any rancher who's threatened can call on the others for help. We patrol our properties collectively and share information about suspicious activity, and we make it known that attacking one of us is attacking all of us. The vote was called. It passed nearly unanimously. As people filed out, Mrs. Patterson from the general store approached Abby. Her expression was less hostile than before, more calculating. I heard you and Nathaniel are engaged. We are. Abby lifted her chin. Is that a problem? On the contrary, it's very convenient for both of you. Mrs. Patterson's smile was thin. He gets a wife to help defend his property. You get security and respectability. Very practical. I love him, Abby said quietly. And he loves me. That's not practical. It's just true. Mrs. Patterson studied her for a long moment. Perhaps. Well, you'll need a dress for the wedding. I have fabric. Good quality. You being a seamstress, I'm sure you can make something appropriate. It was an olive branch, however grudging. Abby accepted it. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. Walking back to where Nate waited with the horses, Abby felt lighter than she had in weeks. The town might never fully accept her, but at least they were willing to tolerate her. It was enough. What did Mrs. Patterson want? Nate asked. To sell me fabric for a wedding dress. He smiled that rare full smile that transformed his face. When do you want to marry? Tomorrow, if Reverend Mills will do it. Tomorrow it is. They married the next afternoon in the small church, with Mrs. Chen, Ezra, Sam, and Thomas as witnesses. Abby wore a simple blue dress she'd made herself, and Nate wore his best shirt with his arm still in a sling. Reverend Mills kept the ceremony short. They were too nervous for lengthy vows, and pronounced them husband and wife just as the sun hit the stained glass windows and filled the church with colored light. Nate kissed her in front of God and their friends, and Abby felt something settle into place inside her. This was real. This was permanent. She was Abigail Bridger now, and that name fit better than Thornton ever had. They spent their wedding night in Nate's room, their room now with Ezra on watch outside, and Mrs. Chen tactfully absent in her own quarters. Nate was gentle patient, working around his injured shoulder, and Abby discovered that intimacy with someone you loved was nothing like the cold transaction she'd feared it might be. It was vulnerability and trust and connection, and afterward, lying in his arms, she felt more herself than she ever had. I never thought I'd have this, Nate murmured against her hair. After the war, after Sarah died, I thought I was done. That I'd just work this land until I died, and that would be enough. Then you appeared in that storm, and everything changed. I'm glad I was a mail-order bride, Abby said. I'm glad Warren abandoned me, because it brought me to you. Don't be glad about that. Be glad we found each other despite it. She turned in his arms to face him. All right, I'm glad we found each other. He kissed her forehead. Me too. The peace lasted exactly 1 week. Abby was in the barn feeding the horses when she heard the shot. She dropped the bucket and ran for the house, grabbing the rifle. Nate insisted she keep close. In the yard, Sam Brennan was dismounting fast, his horse lathered and wild-eyed. They hit the Hartley place, he said without preamble. Burned the barn. Thomas and his wife got out, but they lost everything else. Nate appeared from the house, face set hard. Last night, Thomas sent his boy to fetch me at first light. Anyone hurt? Just property damage. But it's a message. I know what it is. Nate turned to Abby. I have to go help them rebuild. Mrs. Chen will stay with you. Keep the rifles loaded. I'm coming with you, Abby said. Abby. I can help. I can cook for the work crew, fetch supplies, do whatever needs doing. And I'm not staying here alone waiting to see if they come for us next. Nate looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew her well enough now to recognize when her mind was set. All right, but you stay close to me. Always. They rode to the Hartley place, with Sam arriving to find the barn still smoking, and Thomas standing in front of it with his wife, both of them gray-faced with shock. Other ranchers were already arriving, Ezra with lumber, another man with tools, women bringing food and blankets. Abby had never seen anything like it. Within an hour they had a plan. Within 3 hours they'd cleared the burned rubble. By nightfall the frame of a new barn was rising, smaller than the original but solid. They worked through the night by lamplight, and Abby worked alongside them, holding boards steady, while men hammered, fetching water and food, doing whatever was needed. Near dawn, exhausted and filthy, she found herself standing beside Mrs. Hartley, watching the men put the roof on. "Thank you," Mrs. Hartley said quietly, "for coming, for helping. I know people in town have been unkind to you. It doesn't matter. We're neighbors. That's what matters. You're more than a neighbor now. You're one of us." Mrs. Hartley squeezed her hand. "Welcome to the valley, Mrs. Bridger." The words hit Abby like a benediction. She was part of something now, part of a community that took care of its own. The isolation she'd felt, the fear of being alone, it was gone. She belonged here. The barn was finished by the second nightfall. As people prepared to leave, Thomas gathered them all together. "They wanted to scare us," he said. "Wanted us to feel helpless. But look what we did. In 2 days we rebuilt what they destroyed. That's the message we send back. You can burn our barns, threaten our families, but you can't break us. Because we've got something you don't. We've got each other." The crowd cheered, tired but defiant, riding home with Nate and Sam. Abby felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. Let the investors come. Let Warren Blackwood and his hired thugs come. They'd find the people of this valley weren't easy prey. Back at the ranch, Abby fell into bed fully clothed and slept for 12 hours straight. She woke to find Nate sitting beside her, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, voice rough with sleep. "You're magnificent," he said simply. "You worked as hard as any man out there. Never complained, never quit. I'm proud to call you my wife." Abby sat up and kissed him. "And I'm proud to call you my husband. Even though marrying me put you in danger. Especially because of that. It means what we have is worth fighting for." He pulled her close, careful of his shoulder, which was finally healing. "I promise you, Abby, I'll keep you safe, whatever it takes." "I know. But Nate, I can keep myself safe too. You taught me that." He smiled against her hair. "Yes, I did." That night, lying in the darkness, listening to Nate breathe beside her, Abby thought about the journey that had brought her here. The desperation that had made her answer Warren's advertisement. The betrayal that had left her dying in a storm. The stranger who'd saved her and become her whole world. She'd come west looking for survival and found purpose, found love, found home, and she'd fight with everything she had to keep it. The attack came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the Hartley barn burning. Abby was kneading bread when she heard the first gunshot. The second came before she could move, and then Nate was shouting her name, and Mrs. Chen was grabbing rifles, and the world exploded into chaos. "Get down!" Nate yelled, pulling Abby away from the window just as glass shattered inward. She hit the floor hard, bread dough still stuck to her hands, and scrambled for the rifle. Mrs. Chen shoved at her. "How many?" Mrs. Chen asked, already firing through the broken window. 8, maybe 10. Nate's voice was steady despite the bullets thudding into the log walls. "They're behind the barn and the water trough. Professional positions." Abby crawled to the other window and risked a look. Men in dark coats crouched behind cover, firing methodically at the house. Not wild shooting, controlled, deliberate. These weren't ranch hands playing tough. These were men who killed for money. "They're going to rush us," Nate said. "When they think we're pinned down enough, they'll come through the door." "Let them try," Mrs. Chen said grimly, reloading. But Abby saw the math. 3 of them against 10 trained gunmen. Nate's shoulder still weak. They could hold for a while, But eventually the ammunition would run out, or the attackers would set fire to the house, or simply wait until exhaustion made them sloppy. "We need help," she said. "No time," Nate replied. "Nearest ranch is an hour away." A bullet smashed through the window frame above Abby's head, showering her with splinters. She fired back blindly, heard a yelp of pain. One hit at least. "The signal fire?" Mrs. Chen said suddenly. "On the ridge?" "They'll never see it in daylight," Nate argued. "The smoke will be visible for miles. Every rancher in the valley knows what it means." Nate's jaw tightened. "I'd have to get to the ridge. That's 200 yards of open ground." "I'll go," Abby said. "Like hell. You can barely use your shoulder, and Mrs. Chen's the best shot. It has to be me." Abby met his eyes. "You know I'm right." The look on Nate's face told her he did know, and he hated it. But he nodded once sharp. "Through the back. Stay low. Run zigzag. Don't stop for anything." Mrs. Chen grabbed Abby's arm. "The kindling's already stacked under the cairn. There's a tin of kerosene buried beside it. You'll need matches." Abby's hands shook as she took the matches Mrs. Chen pressed into her palm. This was insane. She was a seamstress from Boston. She'd never run through gunfire in her life. But she was also Abigail Bridger now, and that meant something. "I love you," she said to Nate. "Don't you dare say goodbye." His voice was fierce. "You come back to me. You hear? You come back." She kissed him hard and fast, then moved to the back door, while Mrs. Chen and Nate increased their fire to cover her. The door opened onto the kitchen garden, and beyond that stretched open ground rising toward the ridge where the signal cairn stood. Abby took a breath, another, then ran. The first 10 yards were the worst. She expected a bullet between her shoulder blades, with every step expected her legs to give out, expected to die. But she made it to the first cover a woodpile without being hit. Gunfire erupted behind her as the attackers spotted her movement. A bullet kicked up dirt inches from her foot. She ran zigzag like Nate had said, her lungs burning, her dress tangling around her legs. Made it to a boulder, then to a stunted pine. The ridge loomed above her impossibly far. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. A bullet grazed her arm, hot and sharp. She cried out but kept moving. The cairn was just ahead now, a pile of stones marking the signal point. She threw herself behind it, gasping, and dug frantically in the frozen ground beside it until her fingers hit metal. The kerosene tin. The kindling was dry despite the recent snow carefully prepared for exactly this emergency. Abby doused it with kerosene, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the tin. The match wouldn't light. The second one broke. The third caught, and she touched it to the kindling with a prayer. The fire took with a whoosh that made her jump back. Smoke billowed up thick and black from the kerosene visible against the pale winter sky. She fed it more wood, building it higher, and saw the smoke column rise like a beacon. Please see it, she thought. Please come. Then she had to get back. The return trip would be worse. The attackers knew where she was now, but she couldn't stay on the ridge. Nate and Mrs. Chen needed her. Abby took a breath and ran. Bullets chased her down the slope. One caught her skirt, tearing it. Another hit so close the spray of dirt blinded her. She stumbled, fell, rolled, and came up running. Her arm throbbed where the first bullet had grazed her, blood soaking her sleeve, but she didn't stop. She made it to the boulder, then the pine. Then she was in the open with 50 yards to the house and nowhere to hide. A bullet took her hat clean off. Another punched through her skirt. She ran harder than she'd ever run in her life, and the back door was right there, and Nate was shouting her name. And then hands grabbed her and pulled her inside, and she was on the floor gasping while Nate ran his hands over her, checking for wounds. "I'm fine," she managed. "Just grazed." Just grazed. His laugh was half-sob. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing. Did you see the smoke? The whole valley will see it." Mrs. Chen was at the window again, firing steadily. "Now we just have to stay alive long enough for them to get here." The next hour was the longest of Abby's life. They fought from room to room as the attackers tried different approaches. Abby's world narrowed to loading, aiming, firing, reload. Her shoulder ached from the rifle's kick. Her ears rang from the gunfire. Smoke filled the house from all the shooting, making her eyes water. Nate took a bullet through his thigh. He went down hard, face white with pain, and Abby's heart stopped. "I'm all right," he gritted out. "Clean through, keep firing." Mrs. Chen tied a tourniquet with hands that didn't shake, then went back to her position like nothing had happened. Abby wanted to scream, to cry, to give up, but she didn't. She kept firing. Then she heard the most beautiful sound of her life: hoofbeats, many of them coming fast. "They're here!" Mrs. Chen shouted. Through the shattered windows, Abby saw riders pouring over the ridge. Ezra Miller in the lead, Sam Brennan beside him, Thomas Hartley, and a dozen others behind. They hit the attackers from the side in a wave of gunfire and righteous fury. The attackers broke, tried to run. Some made it to their horses, others didn't. The gunfire died away, replaced by shouts and the sound of men being dragged from cover. Then Ezra was at the door. "Nate, Abby, you alive in there?" "Alive," Nate called back, his voice tight with pain. "Barely." The door opened and Ezra stepped in, taking in the destroyed house, the blood, the three of them still clutching rifles. His face went hard. "How many did you get?" "2 dead, 1 wounded," Mrs. Chen reported. "The rest ran. We caught 4. Rest got away." Ezra knelt beside Nate, examining his leg. "This needs a doctor." "It needs whiskey and a bandage," Nate said. "I'll live." "Stubborn fool." But Ezra's voice was fond. He looked at Abby. "Heard you lit the signal fire. Under gunfire." "Had to. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm inclined toward brave." He stood. "Sam's questioning the men we caught. We'll find out who hired them." But Abby already knew. There was only one person who hated Nate enough to want him dead and had connections to hire professional killers. "Warren Blackwood," she said. Ezra nodded slowly. "That'd be my guess too." They brought the wounded inside and sent riders for the doctor and the sheriff. Abby worked alongside Mrs. Chen, cleaning wounds and binding them, while Nate sat against the wall with his leg elevated, refusing to lie down despite the blood loss. "I'm fine," he kept saying, even as his face went gray. "You're a terrible liar," Abby told him, pressing a clean cloth to the wound. "And if you die on me after I ran through gunfire to save you, I'll never forgive you." "Fair enough." He caught her hand. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen. Don't ever do it again. Then don't get shot." "I'll try to remember that." The doctor arrived an hour later, a gruff man named Hayes, who'd seen his share of gunshot wounds. He examined Nate's leg, pronounced it survivable if infection didn't set in, and bandaged it properly. Then he looked at Abby's arm. "You're lucky," he said, cleaning the graze. "Another inch and it would have shattered bone." "I don't feel lucky." "You're alive. That's lucky enough." The sheriff came at dusk with 2 deputies. He was a tired-looking man named Carson who seemed more interested in paperwork than justice, but he took statements from everyone and examined the bodies of the 2 dead attackers. "You'll need to come to town," he told Nate. "Press charges. We'll hold the 4 we captured until trial." "They won't talk," Nate said. "Professional gunmen don't give up their employers." "Maybe not, but we can make their lives uncomfortable until they do." After the sheriff left, the other ranchers helped clean up the worst of the damage. They boarded up the broken windows, swept up the glass, moved the furniture away from the bullet holes. Someone brought stew and bread. They ate together in the ruined house, and Abby felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness of it. "Thank you," she said to the room at large. "All of you, for coming, for fighting with us." "That's what neighbors do," Thomas Hartley said quietly. "You came for us. We came for you. That's how we survive out here." After everyone left, it was just the 3 of them again. Mrs. Chen went to her room, leaving Abby and Nate alone in the main room. He was supposed to stay off his leg, so Abby helped him to their bedroom, supporting his weight as he limped. "I'm sorry," he said as she helped him onto the bed. "For what?" "For bringing this down on you. If you hadn't married me, don't." Abby cut him off. "Don't you dare apologize for this. Those men came here to kill you and take your land. That's on them, not you. And I married you knowing it might be dangerous. I chose this life. I choose you." Nate pulled her down beside him, ignoring the pain in his leg. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do. You deserve someone who fights for you as hard as you fight for everyone else." She kissed him gently. "Now rest. Tomorrow we deal with Warren." But dealing with Warren proved complicated. The sheriff questioned the captured gunmen for 2 days and got nothing. They were professionals hired through intermediaries paid in cash. They claimed not to know who their employer was. "That's a lie," Nate said flatly when Sheriff Carson reported back. "Professional killers always know who hires them. They're protecting someone." "Maybe. But without proof, I can't arrest Blackwood on suspicion alone." "So he gets away with attempted murder." "Unless you can prove he hired these men, yes." Nate's face went dark, and Abby knew what he was thinking. Justice through official channels had failed. That left unofficial justice. "No," she said quietly. "You're not going after him." "Abby." "I mean it, Nate. You go after Warren with a gun, you'll hang. And I won't lose you to revenge. He tried to kill us. Tried to kill you." "I know, but we're alive and he's not worth dying over." She took his hands. "We have something better than revenge. We have each other. We have this life. Don't throw that away for him." Nate was quiet for a long time. Finally he nodded. "You're right. But if he comes near you again, then you'll protect me, like you always do." The decision was taken out of their hands 3 days later, when Warren Blackwood's body was found in the alley behind the Copper Ridge Saloon. Shot once through the heart, professionally done. The sheriff ruled it a robbery gone wrong, but everyone knew better. "The investors killed him," Ezra said when he brought the news. "Probably decided he was more liability than asset after the attack on your place failed." "Good riddance," Mrs. Chen said flatly. Abby should have felt relief or vindication or something. Instead, she just felt tired. Warren had been pathetic and cruel, but he'd also been human. Now he was dead, and the world kept turning like he'd never existed. "Does this end it?" she asked. "The threats, the attacks." "Probably," Ezra said. "With Blackwood dead and their hired guns in jail, the investors will likely move on to easier targets. But keep your guard up, just in case." Spring came slowly that year, thawing the ground inch by reluctant inch. Nate's leg healed, though he walked with a slight limp now. The bullet scars on Abby's arm faded to thin white lines. The house was repaired, the windows replaced the bullet holes plastered over. Life returned to something like normal. They worked, the ranch, tended the cattle, planted the kitchen garden. Mrs. Chen taught Abby to can vegetables and make preserves. Nate taught her to ride properly, not just clinging to a saddle, but actually controlling the horse. And slowly, Abby realized something had changed inside her. She'd come to Montana, broken and desperate, seeing herself as weak. But she'd lit a signal fire under gunfire. She'd defended her home with a rifle. She'd survived an attack by professional killers. She wasn't weak. She'd never been weak. She'd just needed to find what she was strong for. One evening in early April, Nate found her in the barn grooming the horses. He leaned against the stall watching her work. "You've changed," he said. "How? You stand different. Like you know who you are now." Abby thought about it. "I do know. I'm Abigail Bridger. I'm a rancher's wife. I can sew and shoot and survive. I'm not the scared woman you found in the snow anymore." "You were never scared. Just lost." He moved closer. "I have something to tell you." His tone made her set down the brush. "What?" "I got a letter from a lawyer in Denver about the land claim. Turns out there is silver on this property. Not much, but enough that mining companies are interested. The railroad wants to buy access rights. We could sell and make enough money to live comfortably for the rest of our lives." Abby's heart sank. "Do you want to sell?" "I want to know what you want." She looked around the barn, the sturdy walls Nate had built with his own hands, the horses they'd cared for together, the land visible through the open door. This place had taken everything from them and given them everything back. It was soaked in sweat and blood and love. "I want to stay," she said. "I want to build a life here, raise children here, maybe help other women who come west looking for something better. I want to make this valley home." Nate's smile was like sunrise. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." He pulled her close and kissed her, and Abby felt the last piece of herself click into place. She wasn't running anymore, wasn't surviving. She was living fully and completely in this moment, with this man in this place. "I'm pregnant," she said against his mouth. Nate went very still. "What?" "I'm pregnant. About 2 months along. I wanted to be sure before I told you." He pulled back to look at her face, and his expression was everything she could have hoped for. Joy and fear and wonder all mixed together. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby. Are you happy?" "Happy." He laughed, the sound bright and free. "Abby, I'm terrified and thrilled, and I don't know how I'll be a good father, but yes, I'm happy. So damn happy." He picked her up and spun her around, forgetting his leg until it buckled, and they both went down in a heap of hay and laughter. They lay there looking up at the barn roof, hands clasped, and Abby thought about the child growing inside her. A child who would be born into this hard, beautiful land, who would grow up knowing what it meant to fight for what mattered. "What should we name them?" Nate asked. "Hope," Abby said. "If it's a girl, because that's what we found here, Hope. And if it's a boy, you choose." Nate was quiet for a moment. "Daniel, after my father. He wasn't perfect, but he taught me to work hard and keep my word. I'd want our son to have that." "Hope or Daniel?" Abby smiled. "Either way, they'll be loved." That night, lying in bed with Nate's hand on her stomach, and Mrs. Chen snoring softly in the next room, Abby thought about the journey that had brought her here. Every betrayal, every hardship, every moment of terror had led to this. To belonging, to love, to home. She'd answered Warren Blackwood's advertisement looking for survival and found so much more. Found strength she didn't know she had. Found a community that valued loyalty over blood. Found a man who saw her as she was and loved her anyway. The baby kicked for the first time, a flutter so faint she almost missed it. Nate felt it too and made a sound of pure wonder. "That's our child," he said. "That's our future." Outside, spring rain began to fall, gentle and persistent, washing away the last traces of winter. Tomorrow they would work the land, mend fences, plan for the harvest. Tomorrow they would build. But tonight, they simply held each other and listened to the rain and dreamed of the life they were creating together. A life earned through courage and defended with blood. A life worth every sacrifice. Abby had come to Montana to marry a stranger and found herself instead. Found her place in the world. Found her people. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the mountains and painted the valley gold, she would wake beside the man she loved and begin again. Always beginning. Always building. Always choosing this life, this love, this home. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Summer arrived with a heat that made the previous winter feel like a distant dream. Abby's pregnancy showed now. Her dresses let out twice already, and she moved through the house with a careful heaviness that made Nate hover like an anxious hawk. "I'm fine," she told him for the 100th time as he tried to take the water bucket from her hands. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my wife. Not my baby." "Exactly the same as every other woman and every other baby." But she let him take the bucket anyway because the truth was her back ached and her feet swelled, and some days the heat made her dizzy. Mrs. Chen watched them with amusement. "You're going to drive her mad before the baby comes, Nathaniel." "Good, then she'll be too annoyed to be scared." But Abby was scared. Not of the birth itself, though that terrified her too, but of what came after. Of being responsible for a tiny human life in this hard land. Of failing somehow the way her father had failed to keep his business, the way Warren had failed to be decent, the way so many people failed the ones who depended on them. "You'll be a good mother," Nate said one night, reading her thoughts like he always did. "You're strong and practical and you don't give up. That's what children need." "What if it's not enough?" "Then we'll figure it out together. Like we figure out everything else." The baby came on a September morning when the aspens were turning gold and the air smelled of autumn. Abby's water broke while she was making breakfast, and for a moment she just stood there frozen until Mrs. Chen took charge with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd seen dozens of births. "Nathaniel, fetch Dr. Hayes. Now. Don't argue. Just go." Nate went pale, but moved fast, nearly falling over himself, getting to his horse. Abby would have laughed if the first contraction hadn't hit her like a fist. "That's normal," Mrs. Chen said, guiding her to the bedroom. "Everything you're feeling is normal. Now breathe." But nothing about this felt normal. The pain was unlike anything Abby had experienced, worse than frostbite, worse than the bullet graze, worse than anything. It came in waves that built and built until she thought she couldn't survive another second, and then they'd recede just enough to let her catch her breath before crashing over her again. Dr. Hayes arrived an hour later, Nate right behind him, looking like he'd aged 10 years. "How is she?" Nate demanded. "In labor," Hayes said dryly. "Same as every woman who's ever had a baby. Now get out. You're no use here." "I'm not leaving her." "Yes, you are." Mrs. Chen physically pushed him toward the door. "Women's work, Nathaniel. Go chop wood or shoot something. Make yourself useful." The door closed in his face, and through the haze of pain, Abby heard him pacing in the main room. Back and forth like a caged animal. "First, babies take time," Dr. Hayes said, examining her. "Could be hours yet. Try to rest between contractions." Rest. Abby wanted to laugh. Or scream. She did both as the day wore on, and the pain intensified, and Dr. Hayes kept saying everything was progressing normally, while Mrs. Chen wiped her face with cool cloths and murmured encouragements that Abby couldn't quite hear over the roaring in her ears. Somewhere around sunset, or maybe it was midnight time, had stopped meaning anything Dr. Hayes said. "All right, Mrs. Bridger. Next contraction you push." Abby pushed, and pushed, and pushed until she was certain she was being torn in half, until she screamed things she'd never said in her life, until Mrs. Chen's encouraging words turned sharp and commanding. "Again, Abigail. Push again. The baby's almost here." One more push, one more impossible effort. And then a cry split the air, high and angry and alive. "It's a girl," Dr. Hayes announced, holding up a tiny red furious creature. "Healthy lungs on this one." Abby collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing with relief and exhaustion and overwhelming love as Mrs. Chen cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a soft blanket before placing her in Abby's arms. She was perfect. Impossibly small, impossibly perfect, with Nate's dark hair and a face scrunched up in outrage at being born. Abby touched one tiny hand, and the fingers curled around hers with surprising strength. "Hope," she whispered. "Your name is Hope." The door burst open, and Nate stumbled in, face wild. "I heard screaming. Are you?" "Come meet your daughter," Abby said. Nate crossed the room in 2 strides and stopped dead at the sight of the baby in Abby's arms. He made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and sank to his knees beside the bed. "She's so small." "She's perfect." Can I hold her?" Abby placed Hope in his arms, showing him how to support her head. Nate held his daughter like she was made of spun glass, staring at her face with an expression of such pure wonder that Abby's heart cracked open. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I'm your papa, and I promise you I'm going to do everything in my power to give you a good life, to keep you safe, to make you proud." Hope opened her eyes dark blue, unfocused, and looked at her father like she was memorizing his face. Nate laughed, the sound wet with tears. "She's looking at me." "She knows her papa," Mrs. Chen said softly. Dr. Hayes finished his work and packed his bag. "Mother and baby both healthy. Mrs. Chen knows what to do. I'll check on you in a few days." He paused at the door. "Congratulations, Bridger. You've got yourself a fighter there." After he left, Mrs. Chen shooed Nate out so Abby could rest and feed the baby. But an hour later, when Hope was sleeping in the cradle, Nate had built, and Abby's eyes were drifting closed. She heard voices in the main room. "Is it true?" That was Ezra Miller. "You've got a daughter." "Born an hour ago," Nate said, pride thick in his voice. "Hope Bridger. Well, hell, congratulations." The sound of hands slapping backs. "We should celebrate." "Tomorrow. Tonight I just want to sit here and remember how to breathe." Ezra laughed. "Fair enough. Tell Abby the whole valley's talking. First baby born to the Mutual Defense Association. That's good luck." "Let's hope so." After Ezra left, Abby heard Nate's footsteps approaching. He appeared in the doorway backlit by lamplight. "You awake?" "Come here," she said. He lay down beside her, carefully avoiding jostling her, and they looked at Hope sleeping in her cradle. So small, so vulnerable, so completely dependent on them. "I'm terrified," Nate admitted. "What if I mess this up? What if I'm not a good father?" "You'll be wonderful. You're patient and kind, and you know how to build things that last." Abby took his hand. "We'll figure it out together, like everything else." "Together," he repeated. "I like the sound of that." The first weeks with Hope were brutal. She woke every 2 hours needing to be fed, and when she wasn't feeding, she was crying. And when she wasn't crying, she was sleeping so deeply that Abby would panic and check to make sure she was still breathing. "This is normal," Mrs. Chen assured her. "All babies are like this. She'll settle." But Abby was running on no sleep and constant worry, and one night around the 3rd week, she found herself crying in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, while Hope screamed in the next room, and nothing Abby did seemed to help. Nate appeared, took the baby from her arms, and said, "Go to bed. I've got her. You have to work in the morning." Abby, bed, now. She was too exhausted to argue. She collapsed into bed and was asleep before her head hit the pillow. When she woke 6 hours later, dawn was breaking, and she could hear Nate in the main room singing something low and off-key. She found him sitting in the rocking chair with Hope asleep on his chest, both of them peaceful. "You've been up all night," she said. She needed walking, and singing apparently, though I'm not sure you can call what I do singing. He smiled tiredly. She finally settled an hour ago. Abby's throat tightened with love for this man who'd given up sleep to let her rest, who held their daughter with such gentle strength, who'd become everything she never knew she needed. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. Now take her so I can sleep for an hour before the cattle need feeding." October brought the first snow, and with it, a visitor. Abby was hanging laundry. Hope strapped to her back in a sling Mrs. Chen had made when she heard a wagon approaching. A woman climbed down, young and obviously pregnant, with a carpetbag in one hand and fear in her eyes. "I'm looking for Mrs. Bridger," she said. "Mrs. Patterson at the general store said she might help me." "I'm Abby Bridger." The woman's shoulders sagged with relief. "I'm Clara Mason. I came from Ohio to marry a man named Robert Garrett. He owns the lumber mill in Copper Ridge. Or he said he did. But when I arrived yesterday, he took one look at me and said he'd changed his mind. Left me at the hotel with no money and nowhere to go." Her voice broke. "Mrs. Patterson said you'd understand, that you'd been in a similar situation. Abby's heart clenched. She had been exactly where this woman stood, abandoned, pregnant, desperate. The difference was, Nate had found her in time. "Come inside," Abby said. "You'll stay with us until we figure something out." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I can work. I can cook and clean. I won't be a burden." "You're not a burden. You're someone who needs help. That's different." Over dinner, Clara told her story. She'd been a teacher in Ohio, respectable and educated. Robert Garrett's advertisement had promised a partnership, a good life. His letters had been kind and thoughtful. She'd sold everything to come west, believing in his promises. "The worst part is, he looked at me like I was something disgusting," Clara said quietly. "Like being pregnant made me less than human. The baby's father died before we could marry. I thought Mr. Garrett knew that, but he said I'd lied by omission." "You didn't lie," Abby said firmly. "He's a coward who couldn't handle reality. That's not your fault. But now what do? I can't go back to Ohio. I have nothing there." Nate, who'd been quiet through dinner, spoke up. "Copper Ridge needs a schoolteacher. The woman who's doing it now is 70 and wants to retire. If you're qualified, the position's yours." Clara blinked. "But I'm pregnant. Unmarried. They won't hire me." "They will if I convince them to," Nate said. "The Valley owes Abby and me a few favors after we helped organize the Mutual Defense Association. I'll call them in." "Why would you do that for me?" "You don't know me." Abby looked at Nate and saw him remembering the day he'd found her dying in a blizzard. Saw him making the same choice he'd made then to help, because it was right, not because it was easy. "Because someone helped us when we needed it," Abby said. "Now we help you." Clara stayed in the small room that had been Abby's when she first arrived. She helped with Hope with the cooking, with the endless work of running a ranch. And true to his word, Nate rode to every ranch in the valley and called in favors until the town council agreed to hire Clara as the new school teacher. "They're paying me $25 a month," Clara said, stunned. "And I can live in the room above the schoolhouse." "You deserve it," Abby told her. "And your baby deserves a mother who isn't scrambling to survive." "I'll pay you back for everything you've done." "You already are. Every day you help with Hope, you're paying it back." Clara's baby came in February, a boy she named Michael, and Abby was there for the birth, holding her hand and encouraging her through the pain like Mrs. Chen had done for her. When it was over, and Clara held her son with tears streaming down her face, Abby understood fully what they'd built here. A community of women who'd all been broken by circumstances and put themselves back together through sheer will and mutual support. They weren't bound by blood, but by survival, by the simple act of refusing to let each other fail. Spring came again, and with it news that made the whole valley celebrate. The Denver investors had gone bankrupt. Their schemes to buy up land had collapsed, and the hired guns had scattered. The threat that had hung over them for a year was finally truly gone. "We're safe," Nate said, reading the letter from the territorial government. "They can't come after us anymore." "We were always safe," Abby corrected, "because we had each other." Hope turned 1 in September, taking her first wobbly steps and saying, "Mama" and "Papa," with equal enthusiasm. Clara's son Michael was crawling, and the two babies played together on a blanket in the yard, while Abby and Clara watched and talked about expanding the school, and maybe starting a women's cooperative to sell their sewing and preserves. "You've built something amazing here," Clara said. "A place where women like us can not just survive but thrive. We built it together, all of us." That winter was mild compared to the one when Abby had first arrived. She spent the long evenings by the fire with Hope on her lap and Nate beside her, and sometimes she'd think about the desperate woman who'd stood abandoned at Warren Blackwood's gate 2 years ago. That woman seemed like a stranger now. "Do you ever regret it?" Nate asked one night. "Answering that advertisement coming west?" Abby looked around the warm house at their daughter sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Chen, knitting in her rocking chair at the life they'd built from nothing. "Not for a second," she said. "Everything that happened, Even the terrible things led me here. To you. To hope. To home. I'm glad Warren was a coward then. Because it brought you to me. Don't be glad about that. Be glad we found each other despite it. He smiled and pulled her closer. All right. I'm glad we found each other. Hope stirred in her sleep, making the small noises that meant she'd wake soon, wanting attention. Abby rose to pick her up, and Nate followed both of them, surrounding their daughter with warmth and love. In the spring, Abby discovered she was pregnant again. In the summer, Clara got married to the new deputy sheriff, a kind man who loved her and Michael without reservation. In the fall, Ezra Miller's daughter came home from the east with stories of college, and the valley buzzed with the possibility that maybe their daughters could have educations too, could have choices their mothers never did. And through it all, Abby and Nate worked, their land, raised their children. Hope, and then Daniel, born the following year, and built something that would last. Not just a ranch or a house, but a legacy of kindness, repaid of strangers becoming family, of choosing each other every day. On Hope's 5th birthday, the whole valley gathered at the Bridger Ranch for a celebration. Children ran wild through the yard, women shared recipes and gossip, men talked cattle and weather, and the rumor that Montana would achieve statehood soon. It was loud and chaotic and perfect. Abby stood on the porch, watching it all, Nate beside her with Daniel on his shoulders. "Look at what we made," she said softly. "Not just us. Everyone here contributed. But it started with us, with you refusing to leave a stranger to die in a storm." Nate turned to her. "Best decision I ever made. Even with all the trouble it brought. Especially with all the trouble." He kissed her quick and sweet. "You're worth every fight, Abby. Every hardship. Every moment of fear. Because this right here, this life, this family, this community, this is everything." Hope ran up to them, her dress muddy and her hair wild. "Mama, Papa, come see what Uncle Ezra brought me." They followed their daughter into the chaos of celebration, and Abby felt the circle close. She'd come west, broken and desperate, seeking only survival. She'd found betrayal and nearly died for it. But from that lowest moment had come the highest joy, love, family, purpose, home. The abandoned bride had become the heart of a community, the mother of children who would grow up knowing they belonged, the wife of a man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. She'd been tested by winter and gunfire and childbirth and fear, and she'd survived it all. More than survived, she'd thrived. As the sun set over the mountains and painted the valley gold, as her children laughed and her neighbors celebrated, and her husband's hand found hers, Abby knew with absolute certainty that every terrible thing that had happened had been worth it. Because it had led her here, to this moment, to this life, to home. And she would spend every remaining day of her life building on this foundation, helping others the way she'd been helped, choosing love over fear, choosing hope over despair, choosing to believe that even the darkest beginnings could lead to the brightest futures. The mail-order bride who'd been left to freeze had become the woman who warmed an entire valley with her courage and compassion. And that transformation, earned through blood and tears and stubborn refusal to give up, was the greatest victory of all.